Good morning, everyone. We're going to call this meeting of the TRPA Operations and Governments Committee to order. The date is Wednesday, February 22nd. It's a little bit after 8:30. First item on the agenda is the roll call to determine a quorum. Maria?
Ms. Aldine?
Here.
Mr. DeCara?
Present.
Ms. Dis?
Here.
Mr. Honigman?
Here.
Ms. Lane?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next item, which is reviewing the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day. The members of the public who are joining us remotely, which is most of us. To observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov under the calendar heading. Click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for February 22nd, 2023. There you will find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address committee members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking Raise Hand at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA and have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you have used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. To remote committee members, if you wish to speak, you can also now raise your hand in Zoom. You will find the hand icon on the bottom of your screen. Remote committee members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please, everyone, remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down on background noise. Finally, I would also like to ask that all remote members turn on their cameras if they are able. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment and you will be called on to speak. Committee members who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you are viewing the webinar on a personal computer, please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent audio feedback into the room. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda, Chris?
No changes to the agenda.
Then we will deem the agenda approved as posted. Next item is election of a vice chair, which is item number 2 on your agenda. As a reminder to the public, after committee discussion on this item, you may raise your hand in person to be called on or in the Zoom webinar to be unmuted by TRPA staff to share your comments. Are there any questions or comments or nominations for the vice chair of the Ops Committee? Well, seeing no one is making a recommendation, I would like to nominate Brooke Lane as vice chair of the Operations and Governance Committee. There are no objections, and if there are no further nominations, we will go to public comment on this item before taking action. If any member of the public wishes to address the committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Is there anyone in the meeting room who wishes to speak on this agenda item?
Madam Chair, we have no one in the room for public comment and no one online for public comment for this item.
Thank you, Maria. Then we'll close public comment on this item. And if there's no additional or further comments by members of the committee, I'll entertain a motion to elect Brooke Lane to serve as vice chair of the Operations and Governance Committee. Would someone care to make that motion?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Thank you very much. If there's no discussion on the item, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Honigman?
Aye.
Mr. DeCara?
Aye.
Ms. Lane?
Come on, Brooke, there shouldn't be any hesitation. That worries me.
Sorry, I was muted. I said aye right away.
Okay, all right, thanks so much.
Okay.
Ms. Dis?
Yes.
Ms. Aldine?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
All right, congratulations. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of the minutes. We have a set of minutes from January 25th, 2023 on page 9 of your packets. Does any member of the committee wish to make any changes? For the record, I did submit a copy of a few clerical changes to Maria earlier in the week. Are there any additional changes that any member of the committee would like to make? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll deem the minutes approved as amended. Next item is item number 4, which is a recommendation to approve the January financials. Information on this item can be found on page 69 of your packet. Chris?
For the record, Chris Kyler, Finance Director for the agency. Before we start on the actual financials, I wanted to give you an update on our budget status with the 2 states. We did have our first hearing before the joint subcommittees of the Senate and Assembly in Nevada. That was last Tuesday. The hearing, I think, went well. Julie and I and Carl Hasty were testifying on our behalf, and we did have some support from other parties as well. There's no real pushback on any of our requests. The questions they asked were to drill into the understanding the exact nature of the request and things like that. Subsequent to that, I've been working with staff, both LCB and Governor's Finance Office, to clarify some things. And we received 2 formal questions from the subcommittee. The first one is potentially a rather involved one for transportation. They wanted an update on the status on the funding mechanism for transportation in the basin, which of course is quite complicated. The second one poked at our turnover rates and vacancies, and this basically the request for additional money for staffing, which our HR Director Angela is taking care of. We're ready to go on that one. Nick and Devin are working with Carl on the transportation item. So it is on the record that the data that's in NEBS is incorrect, and so that will be adjusted, modified with a later I don't know, update to the governor's budget in the NEBS system. And finally, Alexis has managed to arrange a meeting with the governor's office for us next week. And so we'll be talking to them some more. On the California side, things are much worse. When Governor Newsom released his initial budget in February, he was talking about a $21 million deficit, $21 billion deficit. LAO, their version of LCB, came out last week and said that we think the revenue is going to be $10 billion less than that estimate. With some other puts and takes, they're putting the deficit at about $7 billion higher, so in the $28 billion range. All of our budget requests in California have been put on hold or basically just not included. To be honest, we're not in the general fund, which has the budget problems. We're in the environmental license plate fund and the harbors and watercraft revolving fund. But still, there's just no chance of really getting a good hearing in Sacramento right now when they're dealing through an almost $30 billion shortfall.
Chris, I guess asking how comprehensive your knowledge is of the California budget. Is it possible that the funds that we rely on for funding from California could be rated and applied against the deficit?
Madam Chair, Julie Reagan, for the record at TRPA. I'll build on Chris's earlier report. I was in Sacramento yesterday talking about this very question. And my understanding, of course, until the governor's budget comes out in May as the revision, the May revise, we call it, it's still uncertain because there's a lot of hearings to be had between now and then. But my understanding is the fund, the Environmental License Plate Fund, where TRPA derives most of its general fund appropriations, is stable and not looking at a deficit as it was about 10 years ago. So we're feeling pretty confident that our baseline is secure. Most of our money comes from the Environmental License Plate Fund in California. We also have the Harbors and Watercraft Fund that funds our invasive species program and our watershed and water education program with the boat crew. And those funds are in good shape. Not to say that couldn't change once the final budget negotiations happen. But we basically spoke with our delegation in the Senate, the Assembly, and with the Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, and Brian Cash, his deputy. And so we feel confident that at least our baseline is secure at this point, but no additional budget change proposals were considered, as Chris indicated.
Okay, thank you.
clarifying that, because yeah, I did mean to say it. The baseline should be fine. It's the additional requests, and there's still hope that we might get some of those in the fall.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Chris and Julie. Appreciate that update.
Okay, if I could have the first chart, please. We have a positive fund balance in all of our funds now. It's because we just billed all the second quarter grant invoices, and we have a fair amount of that cash in the bank already. But the balance obviously in the state and local column will go down over time as we spend down through the balance of the year. Can I have the second chart, please? Next chart, please. Performance against budget, everything's on track. We're pretty much where we expected to be at this point in time. The grants are on track. On the expenditure side, everything's pretty much where it should be. Compensation is pretty much where it would be given our turnover and vacancies. And the contract costs always lag and they're slowly building up, but they'll get there. If I could have the next chart, please. And my apologies, Vince, I haven't had a chance to correct this chart to remove the ECM and the mitigation funds from it. We'll try to get that in next month. So right now, this is showing that we did have a negative cash flow for the month, but the 3.8 million of disbursements include 2.7 million going to NDSL for the ECM. So in reality, if you take out the mitigation funds, we're actually positive 800,000 for the month. And that's because we billed a bunch of the grants in January. And we have this program, it's called ASAP. That's a way of electronically drawing down on funds for most of our Forest Service grants. So we can actually get paid on those grants much faster than would normally be the case. Transportation grants, by comparison, will take a month or two to get the cash in the door. So basically, cash flow is fine, except for the ECMs. And obviously then, if the CTC transaction closes, we'll have a further disbursement, even larger disbursement to them. That's pretty much all I wanted to say on the monthly financials, unless somebody has some questions.
Okay, Chris, thank you. I noticed on page 70 of the staff report, it indicated that we had a cash flow, positive cash flow of 900,000. I'm assuming that's been drawn down in the interim.
Sorry, that's just rounding.
That's just rounding. Okay, all right. So it's closer to 9 than 8.
Yeah, it's 840 something.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, any comments or questions from members of the committee on this item? As usual, Chris, good job. And we'll be waiting with bated breath for the governor's budget to come out in May, so we can have some certainty with respect to funding of our additional funding requests. Okay, seeing that there are no questions on this item from our committee, we will go to public comment on this item. If any member of the public wishes to address the committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member.
Madam Chair, there is no public comment in the room or online.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Then we will close public comment. Would somebody care to make a motion to recommend to the governing board approval of the January financials?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Maury, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Lane,
Aye.
Ms. Dis,
Yes.
Mr. DeCara,
Aye.
Mr. Honigman,
Aye.
Ms. Aldine.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us to item number 5, which is a recommendation to approve the TRPA application filing fee schedule. Information on this item can be found on page 91 of your packet. And for those of you who have been on the committee for a while, you'll notice that this is a familiar topic, and Chris will explain why it's coming back to the committee today for reapproval.
Yes, for the record, Chris Kyler, Finance Director. Little bit of egg on our face on this one. It's basically a spreadsheet error. We brought the 2023 planning rates to you back in October for an inflation adjustment of 8.3%. And when we did that, we didn't realize that the 2022 rates hadn't been converted from a calculation to a fixed number. So when we plugged in the 8.3 escalation factor, it escalated both years. and 2022's escalation was only about 5%. So we wound up putting in a rate schedule that was really about 3% higher than it should have been. Unfortunately, those rates actually got into Excella before it got caught. It did get cut pretty quickly within a matter of a few days. We're using a provision in the rules of procedure that allows the executive director to reduce the rates if they're recovering too much money. So we've corrected the rates in Excella in order to minimize overcharging and any refunds. The rates in Excella today are correct. But we need you, the governing board, now to go in and approve the corrected version of the rate chart, which is attached to the staff summary.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And as you had indicated in a previous conversation we had, refunds, and they're fairly minor in nature, but refunds have been issued to all of the affected applicants, correct?
We haven't issued yet, but they will be for most of them. Overall, there were about 23 applicants who were overcharged by about $475. Some of them were very small. So we'd like to set a limit of like $20 and we'll refund everything over $20.
Okay. All right, any questions by members of the committee on this item? Okay, I'm seeing none. All right, then we will go to public comment on this item. Any member of the public wishing to address the committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Maria, anyone in person or via Zoom wishing to comment on this item?
Madam, excuse me, Madam Chair, there is no public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. Then we will close public comment. Would someone care to make a motion to recommend that the governing board approve attached resolution 2023- as shown in attachment A and exhibit 1, amending the TRPA application filing fee schedule?
So moved.
Thank you, Brooke. If there are no questions or comments by the committee, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Mr. DeCara,
Aye.
Mr. Honigman,
Aye.
Ms. Dis,
Yes.
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. Aldine.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 6, which is upcoming topics. Chris, what do we have on our future agenda?
Actually, next month is probably going to be a light month, just like this one, because all we really have are the monthly financials. And then there's I think it's water quality mitigation fund for Myers project. And that's pretty much the only thing on the agenda at this time. Longer term, we'll have continuing conversations on budgets, both the state budgets and the internal TRPA budgets. And obviously, we're all working towards that April offsite where the governing board will set the strategic direction for the agency, and we'll have to factor that into the budget. That's about all I have to say for that, unless somebody has a question.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Chris? Or any recommendations of additional agenda items to be considered? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding no, so then we will go on to public comment on this item. If any member of the public wishes to address the committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Maria, anyone in person or on Zoom wishing to comment on this item?
Madam Chair, there is no public comment for this item.
Okay, then we will close public comment. Again, this was an informational item only. We're now on agenda item number 7, committee member comments. Everybody's been so verbose this morning. I'm assuming nobody has any further comments to make. Okay, all right. Then we will move on to our final order of business, which is our general public interest comment period. If any member of the public wishes to address the committee at this time, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Maria, anyone wishing to comment?
Madam Chair, there are no public comments for this item, the final public comment.
All right, thank you. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, then our meeting is adjourned. at, what time is it? Our meeting is adjourned at 8:51.